Installing and updating software in Linux. A single piece of software is actually composed of many files, source code files, configuration files, and so on. We use the term package to refer to the collection of files that compose that piece of software. And there's two major package managers available in Linux, the Red Hat Package Manager and the Debian Package Manager. They basically operate the same. We're going to talk about their differences, and we'll use the Red Hat Package Manager to install some software on our system. All right, so let's get started. When you go to install a piece of software or a package on your Linux system, it's going to come in one of three formats. It's either going to come as a tar file, an RPM file, or a deb file. A tar file, this tar stands for tape archive. This is kind of like the age-old way to distribute software in Unix and the early days of Linux, and it still works perfectly fine today. Tar file is basically one file, but inside of the tar file are a whole bunch of other files and directories. So when you untar it or you unwrap it, you've got this directory full of stuff that you have to deal with. Now, in that directory might be an executable version of this piece of software, or maybe it's just source code that you're going to have to compile. So it's not necessarily for the novice, but usually it's pretty easy to install software from tar files. The reason not to use tar files in favor of RPM files or deb files is that these guys, these two package managers, make the whole software management process kind of just unifies it all. The software installation, the management of the software, if you have to uninstall software, it keeps track of all this stuff in a database. And the database has information about what packages are installed on your system, what dependencies there are, what packages depend on the package you just installed. That kind of stuff is all maintained in this database. Now, it might seem from the names that Red Hat Package Manager runs on Red Hat systems and Debian Package Manager runs on Debian systems, and that's certainly true. They run on the systems of their namesake here. But theoretically, you should be able to run the Red Hat Package Manager on any Linux installation. You should be able to run the Debian Package Manager on any Linux installation. In practice, you'll find that people don't mix and match these. They don't run the Debian Package Manager on Red Hat systems, and they don't run the Red Hat Package Manager on Debian systems. And the reason for that is, one reason is that they both maintain their own database. So if you start using both package managers to install software on your system, you've lost a little bit of that advantage of having one package manager do all your software installation for you, because then there's two databases. And if you want to get dependency information, you're going to have to look in two places. Now, that's not too big of a deal, but just like I said, in practice, you just won't see people mixing and matching these too often. Maybe if there's just a piece of software out there that doesn't come in the RPM format, it only comes via the Debian Package Manager, somebody might try and use that. Another reason you won't see people using the Debian Package Manager on Red Hat systems and RPM on Debian systems is just because sometimes there's naming conventions on the two distributions that's a little bit different. A library name might be different, or the location of some particular library might be different, or something like that. And then when you go to install some RPM software on a Debian system, it might not work correctly because it's looking for some particular library that it's just named different. It might be on there, but it's just named differently than they're expecting. All right, so that's in practice, you just won't see this mixing and matching going on. And usually the Red Hat system, it's used on the Red Hat Package Manager is used on Red Hat systems. It's used on Mandrake systems, which spun off of Red Hat. Linux PowerPC uses the Red Hat Package Manager, and a bunch of other distributions use RPM as its main package manager. The naming convention of an RPM package is package name -abc. So the package name is just something like Apache or Samba or something like that. And then A.B.C is the actual version number of that piece of software. Okay, then there's a -X, and this number here represents the release, the Red Hat Package Manager release of this piece of software. So if this is like blah, blah, blah -1 and then blah, blah, blah exactly the same thing -2, the only difference, the software is no different. The only difference lies in how it names configuration files or what directories it puts the software in, that kind of thing. Okay, it's just how the RPM program deals with the release, not anything to do differently with the software. And then there's an architecture field here, something like this. i386 might be there, which just stands for Intel 386 processors and later it can run on. i586 or i686 you'll see sometimes. And these are the names for, like, the i586 refers to the Pentium, and the i686 refers to the Pentium 2, and so on. Okay, so that's the most common things you'll see in the architecture field. Sometimes you'll see PPC to represent PowerPC. Okay, that's another architecture you'll see. Sometimes you'll see SRC in that field to represent that this is source code inside of here, and you're going to have to compile it. So it's not a pre-compiled package for some particular particular architecture, it's source code that you're going to have to compile yourself. Now the commands that you're going to use to do RPM, or to do the Red Hat package management, is the RPM command. Now the RPM command has, you give it some operations, you can apply some options, and then you tell it what packages you want it to work on. The most common operations you'll see are -I for install, U for update, -Q for query, E for uninstall are probably the most common ones. I just installs a package from scratch, U updates a previously installed package, Q allows you to query that database, so you can get package information, you can get dependency information, that kind of stuff from the database. And then E just uninstalls the package and all of its helper files, like man pages and configuration files and so on. And then there's options that you can give it. So basically, if you're going to install a piece of software and you do the installation, and then it says, sorry, I can't complete the installation because there's some file I'm going to have to overwrite, or there's some other package I'm going to have to overwrite, or something like that. Well, you can use the -force command if you're sure that you want to do that overwriting of other packages or other libraries. Okay? And so if you use the -force command, be aware that some type, if you have to use that to get the software to install, that something's being overwritten, and that might end up breaking something else in your system. So you should make sure that what it's overwriting is not dependent on by anything else, and you can determine that by using the query option in the database. And then there's a no deps option. So another possibility, when you go to install something, it says, sorry, I can't install because there's these few libraries, or there's this other piece of software that needs to be installed before I can actually install this. All right. So you can force the installation. You can force RPM to do the installation if you use no deps. You just say, ignore that dependency information and just go ahead and proceed. Now, in my experience, anytime I've ever used this to install a piece of software, it hasn't really worked. I mean, if the RPM says, you know, there's this dependency information out, and then you have to satisfy, and if I force it with no deps, you know, the installation process goes through and it completes, but it actually didn't install the software correctly. The only time I could imagine this working is if there was some select piece of the software that you just wanted to use this small piece of the software. You didn't want to have the software be fully functional. All right, so if that was the case, you could say no deps, and hopefully, you know, the dependency information, that might just be for some select piece of the software, and the piece that you use might never use those libraries that it was complaining about. So that might be a possibility there. Now, RPM, the most common version to install a piece of software is to say RPM -ivh package name.rpm. The I does the install, and then the V and the H, what they do is just like print hash marks across the screen as the installation progresses. Kind of just gives you an idea of how far along the installation is. Okay, it's like the poor man's graphical user interface in some sense. So that's probably the most common way to install software with the RPM command. The Debian package manager, on the other hand, is used by Debian Linux and its offshoots like Storm Linux and Corel Linux. The Debian package manager is more highly regarded in the Linux community as a package manager than the Red Hat package manager. And we'll see why in a couple minutes here. Well, you know, just what Debian does that Red Hat doesn't do. Okay, and this is just like the Debian style. It works better, but you know, all the flashy graphical user interfaces and stuff aren't there. But you know, the Debian, like I said before, is all volunteer based, and it's just amazing what this organization puts out in terms of good, solid pieces of software. The commands that for Debian Package Manager are dpackage and apt-get. That's the two basic commands. The options for these commands, for dpackage, you can use -I to install a package, P to purge it, lowercase p to print info about an installed package, and uppercase I to print info about an uninstalled package. All right, so there's some of the more common options. The way that you're going to use this is you're going to get some file. You're going to download some file off the web that's blah blah blah.deb. And the naming convention is basically the same as that Red Hat naming convention. It's going to be the name of the software, the version, the architecture, that kind of stuff, .deb. All right, and then you do like dpackage -I .deb, and that will install the software on your system. And this works pretty much just like the RPM command. There's not really very many differences. The subtle differences might be there, but basically this works just like the RPM command. What sets apart the Debian package manager from the Red Hat package manager is this other command down here, the apt-get command. Now the apt-get command, this works and installs software from remote locations, or updates software from remote locations. And those remote locations that it works from are in a file called sources.list. And this sources.list file, basically what it does is it contains information about trusted websites that you'll download software from. All right, so certainly the Debian website would be a good one to have in here, but anything that's in here should be a very, very reputable place to download software from, like the Debian website. Anything as reputable as that would be a good thing to put in here. All right, then you can say, apt-get space update and give the name of some package like Apache. And this will just go out to one of these locations in sources.list and update your Apache web server automatically. Okay, it'll just go download files, download whatever it needs to get that software updated. Same goes for install. If I say apt-get install Apache, it's going to look through all the locations in sources.list, and it's going to go out to all those places and find the latest version of Apache and download that for me. All right, so this is where the Debian Package Manager wins out a little bit, because when you go to do this installation and it's going to install the software from a remote location, well, when it finds dependency information, like it needs some library to install or it needs some other helper application to make this application that you want to install run, then it's just going to download all that stuff for you. It's going to download those libraries and those other dependent packages, and it's just going to do all those installations as best as it can. If it can't find it in sources.list, then it's not going to work. But if you've got Debian in this list and some other websites like that, most of the basic software is going to install that way, and you don't have to worry about all the dependency information. And that's probably why Debian is more highly regarded, because of this feature right here. I'm going to try and show you something that Red Hat uses to try and approximate apt-get, or maybe they're not just copying apt-get, they're doing their own thing, but basically there's this Red Hat feature that can kind of mimic what this does, and we'll talk about that briefly when we're back out on the Linux screen, so I can just kind of give you an idea of what it does and how it works. Finally, there's tar files. Like we said before, tar files are the age-old way to distribute software in Unix in the early days of Linux, and it still works perfectly fine today, and it works on every distribution that's out there equally well. If you have Slackware Linux, you're going to have to learn how to distribute or how to install software from tar files, because that's the only thing that Slackware supports. It doesn't support any of those package managers. Generally, it's more work to install software from a tar file, because once you unwrap the tar file, there's all these directories, and maybe you're going to have to compile some source code. Maybe, though, there is an executable version of the software in the tar file, and in that case, it's not that much more work to install. The basic use of a tar file is something like this. You'll say tar xvf, the name of the package, which ends in .tar, and then you give a directory where you want to install it. Now maybe the package ends in .tgz. Now, .tgz means it's a tar file, but it's been compressed. That's what the GZ is representing. And in that case, you got to stick a Z in this option field here. So you got to say tar xvzf package.tgz, and then you give the directory. All right? So once you do this, then it takes this single tar file and it unwraps it. And in this directory now, you're going to have a whole bunch of files and subdirectories of subdirectories potentially, and just a ton of stuff's going to be in there. Invariably, in that directory, in the top, in the actual package directory that you specified there, there's going to be this file in there called readme, okay? And guess what you should do with it? Just throw it away. No, read it, okay? And this is telling you what to do for the next steps. All right, it's going to tell you how to compile the source code, what kinds of files you should change for these kinds of settings, how you should change the make file to compile the source code. Or if it's just a binary executable, it'll tell you how to do various things with the piece of software. All right, so don't just toss this, don't just ignore it. Actually read it, and read it carefully, and that'll help you progress through this. And the more software you install with tar files, the more standardized readmes will seem to become, and then after a while you can start just kind of like skimming through them and getting the necessary information out of them, and then you can progress on with your software installation that way. All right, so that's the basics of tar files. We're going to talk a lot more about the tar command 5 or 10 videos down the road once we start talking about backups and maintaining our system. We'll learn all about the tar command. We'll learn what all these various options mean and what they do, and I'll just save all that specific discussion of tar for those lectures. Now let's use some of those tools that we've been talking about. So I'm going to open up a Mozilla web browser to go out on the internet and download some RPM files, and we're going to download those RPM files and install them on our system. So I'm going to go to a website that's called www.rpm, or just 3 W's, .rpmfind.net. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, and now we're on the rpmfind.net server. You can see here it's hosted by speakeasy.net, which is out here in Seattle. And if you page down here, you can see there's a mirror site in Boston, and there's also other mirror sites in Europe. So you should just go to the site that's closest to you so you minimize the amount of time you spend downloading. Now here's a search box, and we can actually search for software using this utility. I'm going to search for this piece of software called XV, which is an image viewer, like a GIF or JPEG images. It allows you to view the images and manipulate them and do things like that. So I'm going to click on search, and it's going to look for the XV utility out there in the RPM site. And you can see here it's found one site for XV, and this is just information about XV, a manual, that kind of stuff on how to use it. And then there's a bunch of RPMs for XV. You can see here these are source RPM, so we'd have to compile those. Let's just look down here for i386 versions. There's an i386 version. There's another one right there. There's a PowerPC version and a Spark version and so on. Okay, so as you come down here, you can see there's just tons and tons of versions. There's different distributions out there that you can get the versions from. I'm just going to get this one right here, the i386 version that's version 3.10 of XV. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and now it's going to ask me, it's going to bring up a dialog box and ask me what to do with the file. First, I want to say yes, save it to disk, so I'm going to click OK. And then it says, do you want to save this to the /temp directory? That's a fine place to save it because everybody on the system can write to /temp. All right, so I'm going to say save the RPM file to the /temp directory, and now while it's saving, I'll just pause the video here. All right, so we're down 2 seconds left, 1 second left, and now it's complete. So the download's complete. It took 56 seconds to download it, and now it's in the /temp directory. So I'm going to close this window, the dialog box here, and then I'm going to minimize the web browser window and bring up my command line interface window. And let's copy that file from the /temp directory over to /opt. All right, so let's go up to the /opt directory. And this is the place where you put optional software. It's just good to keep it all there. At least that's what I do, just to keep track of what optional software I've put on my system. All the RPM files will be in the /opt directory. Okay, now what I'm going to do is copy that file from the /temp directory. It's called XV, and I'll just hit the tab to complete it with all the version numbers and the architecture information and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll put that in the /opt directory, and I'm just going to say dot to give it the exact same name. Okay, so I do that, and now it should be in this directory, and there's the XV file. And now what I'm going to do is install it with the RPM program. So I'm going to say RPM minus IVH XV. Again, I'll hit tab to complete it so I don't have to type all that stuff. And now I stands for install, remember, and V and H are the things that print the hash marks across the screen to let you know how the installation is progressing, how far along it is. So I'm just going to hit enter here, and now you'll see the hash marks move across the screen, 100% installed. You know, that was pretty quick. And now we've got the XV program on our system. Now, one thing when we install that, we got all sorts of other things as well. We can now do a man page on XV, so I can say man XV and then see the manual page. You can page through this at your leisure. I'm just going to hit Q to quit out of this. But installing the software also installed that. That's just what I was trying to show you there. We can run the program just by typing XV. If I type XV, then I get this initial screen. You can see down here it says press right mouse button for menu, so I'll click my right mouse button. And now I get this menu here, and I can load files. And I can bring them in and manipulate them and edit them and see them or whatever. So let me load a file in. From the opt directory, I'm going to go up a directory. So that dot means go up a level. So I'll double click on that. I'll double click on home to go down there. I'll double click on Perry to go into my home directory. And now I'll page down here, and there's this file here called sunset.jpg. So I'll double click on that. And now you can see the sunset.jpg file is open here, and I can manipulate it with the various tools of XV. Here I can rotate it with this button. You can see it's rotated on the side. Rotate it again. I guess that's a sailboat in the southern hemisphere or something. Okay, rotate it again, rotate it again. And there's, you know, what we can do to it. We can crop pieces out of it. So if I want to crop out the sunset, I can drag with the left mouse button over the area, click on the scissors, and that blacks it out, so I could put something else in there. if I was trying to play around and manipulate the image. Okay, so that's kind of how XV works. I'm just going to close it all here. I don't even want to save that. Just click the X button here to close the window, close this one off, and now the XV program's over. Okay, now so that's one way to run it, just like that. A lot of people find it easier to run stuff out of the main menu. Instead of having to remember all the various names of the software on their system, they'd rather just, kind of page through the main menu. So what we can do is add it to a menu here. So we can go to Programs, we can go to Settings, and then we can go to Menu Editor. I'll left click on that, and now we get the no menu editor. It's reading all the menus, and now you can see here favorites is highlighted, and that's typically where we put user stuff. Favorites, user menus is the favorites subcategory, and then the system menu is the one that says programs. Okay, so we'll just put it in favorites. We'll say new item. Now it says what's the name of the item. It just says untitled at first, but we'll just say XV, and then we can even say something like image viewer. Okay, so somebody who doesn't know what XV is would read this and know that it's an image viewer at least. And then we can say what the command is to run it, which is just XV. We don't want to run it in a terminal. That would be like running it in like from the text line prompt, from the command line terminal. We don't need to do that because XV has its own graphical user interface. Okay, so I'm just going to click Save here. All right, I'm going to minimize this window now, and now go out here to our main menu. So we go to our main menu, we go to Favorites, and now we can see it says XV Image Viewer. I can click on that, and now we get that intro screen again. I could click my right mouse button for the menu and so on. But that's another way to run the XV program, is you just run it from the main menus, from this start menu down here, and instead of just having to type the command at the command line. Okay, so that's the basics of RPM. That's what it looks like when you install something without a hitch. All right, we go to install the software, and everything that the XV program needs was already on our system because it just went through the installation fine. What we're going to talk about next is what happens when you go to install something and there's some dependency, there's some library or some other program that needs to be installed before this program can be installed and run correctly. Okay, so that's what we'll talk about next. Actually, before we do that, let me just show you one more thing here. The way that you uninstall a piece of software with the RPM command, you would just say RPM-E XV. So you wouldn't even have to give it all this version number, you just give it the name of the piece of software, and you do that, and I'll hit enter here to uninstall it, and now it's uninstalled. If I did a man on XV, it's not there anymore. If I just type XV, it says, sorry, there is no such file or directory. Okay, so that just kind of gives you an idea what the RPM command does and how it works without any hitches. And like I said, now we're going to talk about what happens when there are some dependencies that are unmet. Now let's go and get some software from another source. This time we're going to get software from rhn.redhat.com. RHN stands for the Red Hat Network. And the Red Hat Network is something that you can sign up for free if you have a Red Hat system. And then basically what you do is you log in and you can download software from their site. Ideally, the way that this could work is that it would work a lot like the apt-get command in Debian. That it would be able to download software and also all the various libraries that are needed and everything else. Okay, so when I log in here, I'm going to go to entitlements, which is what I'm allowed or entitled to download. All right, and they've got my machine name here. And basically, when you sign up for this service, it's all free and everything, and you sign up for it, you run this program on your system and send the Red Hat Network some information about your machine. Okay, and this information you send it tells the Red Hat Network what software you already have installed on your system, what version of Red Hat you're running, what kind of computer you have, that kind of stuff. And then when you go to do an installation, it has more knowledge about what dependencies are unmet if they go to install this, and ideally you'd be able to install this stuff more easily just with like one click, like you could on like a Windows or a Macintosh operating system. It's so easy to install software on those operating systems. And so here I'm going to go to install new packages. You can also go to upgrade packages or look at the packages that are already installed on your system. I want to install a new package, and what we're going to do here is go down and look at this name here, and we're going to type Apache in there. So we're going to filter it out, but all the pieces of software that have to do with Apache, and I'm going to come down here, and there's the actual web server, the Apache web server. There's a development kit, there's a manual, there's a configuration tool, and so on. I just want the actual web server. And then as I go down here, it says you can install selected packages or download selected packages. Now, if you install the selected packages, what's going to happen here is that they're just going to take full control at this point and try to install it. what's happened to me is that sometimes they've scheduled it. I guess maybe their bandwidth was too high right now. They were downloading too much stuff, so they just scheduled me for a couple hours later, that kind of stuff. I'm just going to click on download selected packages just so that we get the actual package. And you can see here that it's actually a tar file that we're downloading. Once we get the tar file downloaded, then we'll see. It says here, the package that you have selected will be in the newly created RHN packages directory beneath your current directory. All right. Okay, so I'll download the selected packages. Again, save this file to disk. We're in the /temp directory. Let me see if I can save it to /opt here, since I'm logged in as the root user now. So I'll do that, and I'll save. Okay, and now it's going through here. And I'm just going to pause the video while this is working. All right, so now the download's complete, and now we'll be able to go up to the opt directory here, do a listing, and there's rhnpackages.tar. So we're going to open it up, and you notice back here they tell you how to do it, tar, xvf, rhnpackages.tar. Typically that minus sign they have in front of the xvf is not necessary for tar, but you can probably put it in on most versions of tar still. So tar, xvf, rhnpackages.tar. And now if we do a listing, there's this directory called RHN packages. So we'll go in there and do a listing, and there's the Apache RPM file. Now we'll install this. We'll do the RPM-IVH Apache. If I spell it right, there we go. And now I'll hit enter, and now it says failed dependencies. There's this library, libmm.so.11 is needed by Apache 1.3.22-6. So now let's try and satisfy this dependency. All right, so our goal here is to find this libmm.so.11 library. All right, and if we get that library installed on our computer, then we'll be able to install Apache. Now, here's a little tip for you if you're a novice or an intermediate user. You're not going to find this library just like in plain text somewhere, and you're just going to download that library. Okay, what you need to do is you need to find a package like the mm package, and if you install the mm package, then you'll get libmm.so.11 as a result of installing that package. And if you do a search on Google, like maybe you can't determine that just from looking at this. Well, if you do a search on Google for libmm.so.11, you'll find something out there that gives you some information about what package provides this library. That's what we're looking for. What package provides the libmm.so.11 library? And that's the mm package. So what we're going to do is open our web browser up again. I'm just going to go back to rpmfind.net to search for this mm package. I'm just going to go in there, type mm, hit enter, and now we've hopefully found some stuff here. It found 82 RPMs for MM. So, there's all sorts of RPMs out here. Some of them have MDK in them. They're for Mandrake. They'll probably work on your system if you don't have Mandrake, but I like to just stay away from stuff that is somewhat specific to some distribution. I like generic stuff. So here's one for the i386. It's the shared memory library. That's what MM is. So I'm going to click on that. All right. And I'm just going to pause while this is downloading. All right, so I've downloaded it to the temp directory. Okay, I'm going to close this window, and then I'm going to bring up my web browser here, or my command line window. All right, and now what I'll do is I'm going to copy from the temp directory that RPM file, and I'm going to copy it to my local working directory, and I can do that by just specifying a period there. And now if I do an ls, you'll see the RPM files in here, and now we're just going to install it. RPM, IVH, all the way, and I'll tab it and just complete it. Okay, now when we install this file, keep your fingers crossed, because what we really don't want to see is that it fails to meet these dependencies, and we have to go out and look for more stuff to install. All right, but this is, it's not too big a deal. If you have to do it once or twice, it's not such a big deal. Once you have to do it like 5 or 6 times, it starts to get to be a hassle, and then you really appreciate, like, downloading stuff with just like one click. Okay, so here we're just going to hit enter here and keep your fingers crossed. All right, it installed. Okay, so now the thing installed, it installed very quickly. Now what we want to do is we want to install Apache, and I'm going to do that one now. I'm going to hit enter. And now Apache installed. All right, so now we've installed Apache. We went out and actually met that dependency by downloading the package, installing the package, and now the dependency is met and we could install Apache. All right, good job. So the moral of the story here is just that, it's nice to have software programs that go out and do this stuff for you. Like the Debian package manager probably would have taken care of this with the apt-get routine. And the Red Hat network, if we had just like scheduled a download and let the Red Hat network do the download for us, that might might have worked perfectly well too. I don't know. When I tried to do that, it just scheduled me for tomorrow or something, and I didn't want to wait to record that. Okay, so the idea here is though that even if you have that software on your side, occasionally it doesn't work. It's unable to meet the dependencies, and you're going to have to go out and do it on your own. And that's a really important part of installing software in Linux, is trying to determine, how to get these various libraries and stuff. And I just tried to give you a little bit of a tip today to do that so that we can install the Apache web server. All right, so that's a good lesson for you to download the dependencies. And now we're just going to play around with Apache a little bit since we just installed it. The first thing that I want to show you about Apache is just how to start the web server. So what we can do here is we can go to /etc, and then under /etc is a subdirectory called init.d, and in there is a script called httpd. HTTPD stands for the Hypertext Transfer Protocol daemon. And the Hypertext Transfer Protocol is the protocol that's used when you use the web browser over the internet to look at some web page. That's the protocol that you're using. Okay, so later in a few videos down the road, we'll talk about how to start other services and how to stop other services on your system, and it's going to be similar to this. We'll talk in more detail then about how to stop and start services. I just kind of want to get you started with the Apache web server right now, just to show you a couple things. So what we'll do is we'll say this, we'll run this script, and then we say start. We put a space in there and say start, and that will start the web server on our machine. All right, now look at this alert here. It says, could not determine the server's fully qualified domain name. And that's because I don't have a fully qualified domain name on this machine that I'm running. But if I did, then what that means is that anybody could look at my web server over from any computer at all on the internet. So they would look at it by typing something like www.cbtnuggets.com. That's a fully qualified domain name for the web server for CBT Nuggets. Okay, you can see here it says it could not determine the fully qualified domain name, so it's using 127.0.0.1 as the internet address for my web server. Now what this number here is, 127.0.0.1, is actually the local loopback address. So when we talk about networking in a few videos, we'll use this address to diagnose whether our network is up and running. For right now, just know that 127.0.0.1 refers to the local machine, no matter what machine you're sitting on. And if we want to look at the web server for this local machine, we can type this address into a web browser. So let's do that right now. Let's open up a Mozilla web browser. Click on that red horse head there. And we're opening up the Mozilla web browser. And then what we'll do is we'll type in the address 127.0.0.1. So I'll hit enter. Okay, and now we get this test page. You can see here it says this page is used to test the proper operation of Apache. If you can read this page, it means the Apache web server is installed at this site and is working properly. Okay, so that's good. So it's working properly. It says if you're the administrator of this website, you may now add content to this directory and replace this page. So what's this directory? What's this page? Let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, so let me minimize this window. Now we're back at the command line, and let's go to the etc httpd directory. Under there is a subdirectory called conf for configuration. So we'll go in there and do a listing, and you can see there's various configuration files for the Apache web server. This is the one that we want to look at, the httpd.conf. This is the most important configuration file in here, and what this configuration file holds is all sorts of stuff. Let's actually look through it with the more command. We'll do that. And now we're looking through it one page at a time. I'm going to hit the / down here to search for a couple terms. Let's look for root first, capital R-O-O-T. So we'll hit enter, and now we find in the various things about root. There's the server root there. I'll hit N for next. And here's the actual definition of the server root. It says /etc/httpd. All right, so what this is this is stuff like where the configuration files are, where the error files are, the log files, that kind of stuff is kept under /etc/httpd. So I'm going to hit N for next again, and now you can see here's the document root. Now the document root is where the documents that the web server serves up, where those various pages are kept, and that's in /var/www/html. Okay, so let's go to this directory now and look at the files in there, and so we can see where this test page was located. All right, so I'm going to quit out of here with a Q, and let's go over to that var directory. We'll go to var www/html, and we'll go in there and do a listing. And you can see in there this file called index.html. This is the file that is our initial page here. Let me bring this page back up. You can see here the page, the title for that page is test page for the Apache web server on Red Hat Linux. The first thing on the page is this big text called test page. This page is used to test the, and that's the text that's written there. So now what I want to do is look at this index.html file, and we'll look at it using the VI editor. Okay, so I'll hit enter here. So I'm going to VI index.html and hit enter. And now we're here. So here you can see the title, test page for the Apache web server on Red Hat Linux. That's what was up at the top of the title bar up here on the actual web page. Here the H1 here is just a large header. H1 is the largest size, and H just stands for a header. You can see it's aligned in the center, and the text of that header is test page. All right, so again, going back to the web browser window, that's what creates this piece of text right here. Okay, that's what's creating that piece of text. All right, and then you can see this page is used to test the proper operation of the Apache web server. Again, if we go back to the web browser window, you can see that text. This page is used to test the proper operation of the Apache web server. Okay, so this is the page that we're seeing there. All right, so if we make an edit to that page, let's just go down with the down arrow. We'll go forward here with the right arrow, and I'll hit I for insert. And now I can just type something. Let's type Perry's test page. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll save that. I'll hit escape, shift colon, and then WQ to write my changes and quit out of the VI editor. And now I've changed index.html. So let's go back to this web browser. Okay, and you don't see it says Perry's test page. That's because this is the old test page that we were looking at. If I hit reload, that'll reload it, and now you can see it says Perry's test page there. All right, so now we've changed index.html. If you were really running a web server, you'd probably just completely scrap this index.html file and start over and just, put up whatever content you wanted to. Okay, this is just a way for you to get started to see what's there. You learn some HTML. It's not too hard to learn, and you can put up whatever kind of web pages you want on your system. And Apache and Linux is probably the most popular way to run web servers out there on the internet today. Most of the web servers that are out there are Apache web servers running on Linux computers. Well, it's time to wrap up our nugget on installing software or packages, and we talked about the main package managers in Linux, RPM and Debian, and I tried to just give you an idea of how to use these to install software, and then we actually walked through some installations with the Red Hat package manager, and you saw the good side of things, how it just installed nicely, and it dealt with everything. Then we saw when we actually had some dependencies, how to take care of those dependencies, and that's really like the central theme of this video, is just how you're going to have to deal with problems when you're installing software, and that was sort of a classic problem that we ran into, and we walked through the solution to it. Well, I hope you found this nugget informative, and thanks again for viewing.